the Tory MP Danny Kruger has basically said that the Tories will leave the country sadder, less united and less Conservative. He basically says that he thinks that the Conservative Party essentially could face obliteration at the next election. A little bit extreme. Is it true, though, David?
He's not wrong. The problem that the Tories have is that they're not giving anybody any reason to vote for them. All their core voters are staying at home, according to the polls at the moment, or going to Reform UK. Some are even going to Labour. If things don't change and change dramatically, then, you know, they could be down to a historically low level of seats.
When you say change dramatically, what does that look like?
Well, you know, I was just thinking about the last poll I saw before the new year. And that gave Labour a 23% lead. Now, if you work that through the algorithms, and that's never an exact science, but if you work it through the algorithms, that puts the Conservatives on around 100 seats. Their worst ever result is 1906, when I think they got 150 odd seats. You know, this is a 345-year-old party, the oldest political party in the world, and, you know, it would be historically bad result. Not as bad as the Canadian one a couple of decades back, where they got wiped out, literally, I think maybe two seats.
That's right.
But, you know, we're not... if things get worse, we might be looking at that as well. It's things are
really you think we could be in a situation where, give or take, the Tories could literally be reduced down to 2 seats? Well, it's a bit dramatic.
I mean, let's say that they don't do anything to get the Conservative base to start wanting to vote for them again. Let's say that Nigel Farage, for example, makes a comeback with Reform UK, takes them to the mid-teens. That splits the centre-right vote, you know, and we're talking about very low, historically low levels of...
Richard Johnson?
I mean, politics at this moment is very volatile. Within this very same Parliament, the Conservatives have gotten over 50% of the vote in the polls. The last general election was a very sizable majority for the government. We've seen in the course of the short campaigns of a general election, say in 2017, the polls change dramatically. And so I think that at the moment, if we had an election tomorrow, that yes, the Conservatives would be facing, if not complete annihilation, a historically bad result. But British politics is very changeable at the moment, and it's not the case that they would be, you know, Labour can just rest on its laurels and assume to strut into Downing Street.
You see, how helpful is this? Someone like Danny Kruger kind of saying these things, making these remarks. If I was Rishi Sunak, I would want to literally get all of my people into a room and give them the biggest telling off, bigger than any telling off I've ever given my 3-year-old and then some. I would really be clamping down on all of these loose lips, all of this kind of talk, all of this chat. It is not helpful, and surely it's not helpful to the morale of the Tories.
But the problem here is that the Tories now are so fractured and are so angry with one another. They're more angry with their different factions than they are with the Labour Party. And, you know, Danny Kruger, I'm afraid to say, is part of one of those groups. We saw them, 5 families, they were termed before Christmas, you know, most of whom would like to see Rishi Sunak out and would like to push him out and get an alternative leader.
Like who?
Well, I mean, there's various names. There's Kemi Badenoch being mentioned, there's Suella Braverman being mentioned. It's almost got to the point of anybody but Rishi amongst some of them. And I personally think that would be catastrophic for them. I mean, a 3rd change of leader, a 4th leader after an election would just make them a laughing stock. But, you know, they've got to the point where some of them are saying, can it be any worse?
Sorry, go on, Richard.
But it's not just about the personality in charge, it's actually about the agenda. And I think what's happened is that the Conservatives have lost sight of really why they did so well in 2019. I think the political sweet spot in this country is actually not that difficult to determine. It's a mix of having well-run public services, generous but fair benefits, but also being tough on crime, strict with borders and patriotic.
Oh, come on, it wasn't any of that in 2019. I ran in that election, I did door knocking, I spoke to the electorate, I remember it. It was, they're all noble aims, and I don't disagree with you that they're important, but I remember that election, that cold, wintry December. I remember it well. What people were saying, it was the Boris effect. It was get Brexit done. They wanted their vote to be respected.
That was all packaged into, that was a means to an end. Right? They wanted Brexit done, absolutely, but Brexit was seen as a means to achieving these other ends, being strict on the borders, being able to have better funded, well-run public services. And the reality is that I think that the Conservative Party actually began with Boris getting distracted under COVID, but has continued, has lost sight of that. And actually, Keir Starmer, someone who I think has a number of flaws, but actually what he has done in the last couple of years is he's moved Labour into that space. And ultimately, I think that is the winning space in British politics.
Although I have to say, I think that the one trump card that the Conservatives still have is Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, because nobody really knows what they stand for. Nobody really has actually kind of looked at what they plan to do yet. And I think as we get closer to the election, the focus on them is going to get much tougher. And actually, I think Starmer's going to struggle because, this is a man who's U-turned, more times than a ballroom dancer, and he's going to get exposed. So there is some hope for them in that respect.
Well, I'll throw it open to you at home. David says that people don't know what Starmer stands for. Do you? Do you think he's summarised his sales pitch, for want of a better word? I noticed as well he was saying basically that Sunak is putting vanity before his country if he decides to delay an election. I found that absolute nonsense. Surely any Prime Minister, you try and hold on to your power for as long as you could. You try and steady the ship as best as you can. And surely you'd go to the electorate at the last possible moment. You could, wouldn't you? Wouldn't that be exactly what Starmer would do as well? Dave says, I voted Conservative all my voting life. I hope they do get obliterated, he says. High tax, high debt, big government and high immigration. We need a Conservative government now more than ever. But the con-socialists, he says, need to go. Steve says, Michelle, this is the worst government in the last 50 years. We would not be voting for them. Rishi was selected, but he won't be elected. Harsh words. Nice rhyme to it, though, but harsh words.